Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always by my co-host Nick Filato, and today we're here to give some key takeaways, recap, and just discuss Joe Schoen's pre-draft presser. Joe Schoen just spoke Wednesday at noon, kind of previewing 8 days away from the NFL draft, what we might expect from the Giants. And one thing that stood out to me, Nick, that I wanted to touch on first was the admission from Joe Schoen that they have received calls from teams who are looking to trade up to number 3 in the draft. Now, that's not him saying we're looking to trade up from 3 to 1 or 2. It's the opposite. Teams are looking to come up, get the third pick from the Giants, whether that be for a quarterback or for one of these two blue chip players, Carter or Hunter. And Joe Schoen said he's open to it. He's open to these trades and this possibility. Did you make anything of that, or is this kind of just GM speak from him?
I think a lot of it is GM speak. Now, Joe Schoen also insinuated that he doesn't know exactly where they're going to go and all that. And you know what? Maybe that's true. Maybe. But I tend to think a lot of what we heard was GM speaking, but that doesn't mean there wasn't necessarily anything valuable within what Joe Schoen articulated towards the entire New York media.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm dealing with some construction issues here, but it's going to be have to deal with today. And one thing that I took away from that was just his idea that and he even said this, Nick, he's still gathering information, trying to figure out what Cleveland will do. It was interesting. He didn't say he's trying to figure out what Tennessee will do. I think that's pretty much decided now that they're taking Ward, and there's no real even discussion there. But he doesn't have a good feel for what Cleveland will do. And they could take Travis Hunter at 2. They could take Abdual Carter. They could take Shedeur Sanders. In his mind, he's not sure. He's still trying to gather that information. And Joe Schoen discussed a little bit of that when it came to the players that might be available. Start with Abdual Carter. Joe Schoen said they will have a medical meeting tomorrow with Abdual Carter. And he says, I don't think there's going to be much room for pause there. And that's something that kind of corroborates what Carter's agent has said about this is a non-issue. He will not have to get the surgery. It's the less, I guess, stressful. It's a stress fracture, I believe. It's not a stress fracture. It's a stress. I'm not exactly entirely sure. But the idea behind this is they'll do a medical check to make sure. But the expectation is that there's going to be no issue for him. He'll be ready for camp. He'll be ready for the season. And so I think that's really important to kind of get the idea of, look, if we take this player, Carter, we may not have to deal with this injury at all for the 2024 season or 2025 season.
That's what the hope is when it comes to Abdual Carter. That's what everyone has said. But is that what's going to happen? That remains to be seen. There's no way that Nick Filato or Dan Schneider is going to know that. We're not doctors, and we cannot prognosticate the future with that type of certainty. If we could, we would all be millionaires due to sports betting.
Yeah. And he also said that they have no issues. He said you can never have too many pass rushers, and they would find a way to use him. So I think this kind of corroborates what we've said, Nick. We have no issues or concerns with how they would use Carter if they drafted him. We don't believe it.
Pointed to the Eagles, too, as an example,
Yes.
which is the hot example to point to. But you can look back over the last freaking 30, 50 years of football, and you could see, oh, wow, teams who can really get after the passer and have a good defense. Color me surprised, Dan. They usually tend to be successful.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of that third pick, he also says we like our options at 3. We like who will be there. So while saying he's open to receiving these calls about teams trying to trade up to number 3, I don't ultimately get the feeling, I should say, that he is going to trade back. I think the Giants will stay at 3 and take one of those 3 players.
Yeah, that's what we've been at for quite a while
Yeah.
now, unless it's getting blown away. And I don't know if any of these teams are doing that to trade up for a non-quarterback unless somebody is in love with Shedeur Sanders.
And speaking of quarterbacks, he had a lot to say on the quarterback point. He said a couple things. One, that he believes there's different kinds of quarterbacks in this class, and that he does believe that quarterbacks, he said multiple, Nick, will go on to play and be starters from this class. That may be media speak. I don't know.
Yeah.
But he also mentioned that if they draft a quarterback in the later rounds, maybe 3, 4, or past that, he doesn't necessarily believe they have to be long-term starters, or you have to believe they can be your franchise quarterback. He talked about the value of drafting a quarterback later to be your quarterback too, because of the cost control. And this is something that's really struck with the Giants specifically, Nick, because they were priced out of Tyrod Taylor 2 years ago, and it impacted them, and they had to take the bargain barrel bin of Drew Lock. And they even said, like, look, we don't have much cap space left, functional cap space. It kind of worked out because Drew Lock kind of could only take this exact amount of money now. Looking back on it, it's kind of laughable because Drew Lock probably should have only taken that amount of money. Anything more than that wouldn't have made any sense. But we've seen that play a role in their decisions. And even this year, Jameis Winston did not sign a big contract to be that QB2. So he sees value in maybe taking a long-term guy. And he even said maybe he can eventually be your one, but he sees the value of just getting your QB2 cost controlled for 4 years on a rookie contract that what would cost him, 1 million or less against the cap on a yearly basis.
Yeah, it can come in if something happens. Maybe you can find lightning in a bottle, and this guy ends up developing into something more than just your backup quarterback. The Giants have looked at guys who tend to fall into this bucket. The Kyle McCords from Syracuse, formerly of Ohio State, they brought in for a top 30 visit. I think Tyler Shuck is more than that, but we know the Giants are doing their due diligence at the quarterback position. But as Joe Schoen also said, Dan, what the New York Giants did during free agency puts the Giants in a position where they are not pigeonholed or feel
Right.
forced to take a quarterback. And that's exactly what we wanted Joe Schoen to do. They signed those two veteran quarterbacks, like you and I said back in freaking, what was it, December, January? Like, they better pour assets into this quarterback position. Joe Schoen also touched on that. So now the Giants aren't necessarily hamstrung or feel forced to take a quarterback.
Yeah, and that's a good position to be in, I think. Obviously, when you consider this class, everybody has their own opinions of this class. I don't find this to be a good quarterback class. One of the worst I've evaluated in years. Not as bad as the Kenny Pickett class. At least I see some hope with some of those guys outside of Ward. But, I don't feel too confident in any of those guys outside of Ward. Even Ward, for me, would be QB4 in last year's class. So it is what it is. Not every class is going to be good. And Joe Schoen, as you said every GM wants to get a quarterback, but the value has to be right. And we'll see if he does deem that value right at number 3 overall or at number 34, right? Or that's another position where he might deem that value right or not right. Same goes for 65. That's when it starts to become less of a discussion, I think, of value and more of a discussion of, do you believe this guy has upside to either be your QB2 for cheap long-term or, like you said, that lightning in the bottle player. A few other things he mentioned that stood out to me. He said that he has not yet talked to Evan Neal about transitioning to guard, but he believes that Neal will be open to doing what's best for the team and said he's already recovered from injuries and has had a really good offseason, whatever that means. But they have not decided yet and made decisions yet on fifth-year options for Neal or Kayvon Thibodeau, Nick. So that's an interesting one to me.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. But again, I think a lot of that is GM speak. When it comes to Kayvon, that's very interesting. I'll give you that. But the Evan Neal, are you really considering picking up Evan Neal's fifth-year option?
No, right now it's not even a
Probably not.
consideration.
No.
Yeah.
Unless this offseason that Joe Schoen just talked about was absolutely insane and Evan Neal has revitalized his career during this offseason, I don't necessarily envision that.
I'm with you on that. And he also talked about, Nick, yesterday we discussed on our live show the conversation or the interview that Travis Hunter had where he's like, I want to play both sides of the ball. And if a team doesn't believe in that, like, not screw them, but like, I know I can play both sides and I would rather, not play, I think he said, than play both sides. And Joe Schoen was asked about this and Joe Schoen said, I think he'll be able to do both. He says, we like our secondary right now and we feel really comfortable about our top 3 receivers, but I believe that he's proven he can do it. And that means playing both sides of the ball. He said that he said the thing to monitor with Hunter would be how him or any player handles the mental part of the workload, of playing both sides of the ball. But he said physically and based on his ability, he has no concerns that Travis Hunter could play corner and wide receiver at the NFL level.
Yeah, I'm a little dubious of this. Again, I think you can play him majority one position and then somewhat on another position. And that's probably easier to do the majority on defense. Maybe he is so special that you can flip it and play him majority offense and then find ways to play him on defense. I think that would be very difficult. This kid, though, high processing type of player, high character player. He's going to put the work in to learn the offense and the defense to get himself out there, to put himself in the best position to succeed in this dual role. But even within that, you have to add the physical element and the fact that he is like 187 or 190 pounds. That's a whole nother dynamic. And then a 16-game schedule which this kid is not used to either. 17-game schedule, which this kid is also not used to. So there's a lot of factors that lead me to believe that this might be a little bit pie in the sky, regardless of the fact this is an issue quote unquote, the Giants can deal with once they bring in this uber talented guy who I think is blue chip either on offense or defense.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I think it's something that it's a good issue to have. Like you said, he both ultimately probably would play more of one position and then rotate out in the other. Yeah, you can't imagine him playing both sides of the ball like 85% of the snaps. That's
Imagine this guy taking as many. Say this kid catches like 9 balls. He's taking
yeah,
9 big hits from
yeah,
linebackers and safeties and deep. And then right after, you got to go out there and play deep. Like again, we brought this up on the live show yesterday. It's just you're going to be a defensive liability just due to fatigue, unless you're legit an alien. You have to be like an Adrian Peterson type of alien to be able to do this. Maybe he is
true,
that. Maybe he is
true.
that. But over a 17 game sample size, color me skeptical.
I think that's fair. I do think it's funny though. Before Joe Schoen had this interview, I saw 2 things pop across my Twitter feed this morning, back to back, and one was Matt Harmon, who is reception perception, one of the I think best wide receiver evaluators, at least one of the most dedicated. Has his system, watches the tape, and has a way of breaking them down. He said, when he watches his tape, the receiver he's reminded most of is prime Odell Beckham Jr. as a receiver for Travis Hunter. Really, really high praise. And then right after that, it was a clip from Sam Monson, who was like showing a still shot, and then the video of like, and it's Travis Hunter in coverage. Like somehow Travis Hunter broke on this ball and intercepted it, and he's like so far away from the play and so far away from the quarterback who's attempting it there. So that's interesting to me as well, just how good of a prospect he can be. He's still my number 1 target for the Giants in this draft class. If I could pick any player, it would be, assuming Cam Moore goes at 1, it would be Travis Hunter. Another thing that was mentioned by Joe Schoen was he believes the depth of this class comes at defensive line, interior defensive line, edge, running back, and cornerback. That's an interesting one, the last one. Let's start there, because he also mentioned when discussing Travis Hunter, he feels really comfortable with his current cornerback room.
Yeah, he does feel comfortable. He also brought up, though, a little bit later on that his entire secondary is going to be up for a contract at a certain point, like 3 years down the road, and Dexter Lawrence will also be. And that's something that you want to mitigate as a general manager. Now, that's thinking that he's going to be around that long is, that's some top-notch thinking, but he wants to make sure that that the position groups are all taken care of from that perspective. He brought in, I think, 2 top 30 visits, and we'll get into this on another episode. Top 30 visits in the secondary. The kid from Penn State, Reed, the safety, and then Corey Black, I think his name is, from Oklahoma State. I'm going through Black's film right now, and just I've watched so much Oklahoma State defense over the last 24 hours or so. I'll circle back with a little bit more information on him once I'm done with his evaluation that will be posted over at Giants Country. But I would not be shocked if they take a flyer on somebody that they like on day 3, even though it's cornerback, and the cornerback room is relatively solidified in Joe Schoen's mind due to the comments that he just made.
Yeah, you got to draft into the depth of the class. That's the key to getting a good roster. It's understanding a draft class, where the talent is, and then taking those players from that group instead of saying, I need this position more, I need that position more. That's how stupid teams do it. That's how the bad teams do it. That's why they keep losing. You have to take players. You can't take positions. It's the key to this whole thing. Like, because guess what? Most of these guys aren't going to work out, especially as you get past the top 50 prospects. So you really need to make sure you have a good grip. And that's what they did with Tyrone Tracy. And that's why that one hit. That's what they did with Theo Johnson. And I expect that one to hit too in the future if he can stay healthy as well. And I think there's a reason behind it. So I think, if you want to double dip, even Nick, and we discussed this on one pod, and some people are open to it, some people are against it. You take a D line at 34.65. You see a D line sitting on the board at 155 that shouldn't be there. Take him because he's the best player on the board by far. And the same goes for, I wouldn't say double dip, but edge even. You take Abdual Carter at 3, take somebody at 155 or 105 or 99 if you think he's the best player on the board. And that's the strength of the class, because he mentioned edge as well. I think you really need to focus, and he will, on drafting the best players in this class and less so filling out a roster need by need.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Look, we all love to work out. The summer's coming around. You want to look good in your bathing suit. But in order to enhance your workout, you want to go and use MitoPure from Timeline. This is a great product. When I started using it, it makes me feel stronger, gives me more energy. I recover quicker. I'm in my 30s. I still have the energy to work out. And if you want that energy, you really should give Timeline's MitoPure a shot and work it into your routine. The great year of 2025 is your year to be the best, most energized, most revitalized you. MitoPure promotes cellular renewal and mitochondrial health to address common signs of aging at the root. MitoPure is the research-backed innovation that unlocks your fullest potential. Timeline is offering 10% off your order of MitoPure right now. So go to timeline.com timeline.com/banter. It's timeline.com/banter. That's TIMELINE. And we know Joe Schoen has overlooked outliers before in the
Right.
past. He did a lot during 2022 with Cordell Flott being like 170 pounds as a cornerback, with Wan'Dale Robinson having Tyrannosaurus Rex arms and also being undersized and short. Look at this edge room, this edge class, I should say. There's a lot of outliers, a lot of guys with sub 32-inch arms, some guys with they brought in Ollie,
Sure.
not Ollie Gordon. They brought in the other kid from Oklahoma State. He's an edge rusher. Connerly, I think his name is. Regardless, I was just watching some of his tape. The guy had like 40 pressures, I think, in every season other than this last one where he only played, and we'll go over this in the next podcast too, where he only played 2 games. He was hovering around 40 pressures, but he has sub 31-inch arms, which is so bad for an edge rusher. And he's been kicked to linebacker. But when you turn on his tape, it's at the edge where he catches your attention. Will the Giants go in that? Like, this guy might not be drafted. He's not going to be on so many boards because of those short arms. But I can see Joe Schoen saying, okay, I know we have these thresholds. We want guys with certain length, but in certain packages, nickel pass rushing packages, we can use this player, this Oklahoma State pass rusher, put him in there, and he's going to add juice. And he's there in the 6th, 7th round. Bring him into the building. I think Schoen will be able to overlook some of those thresholds. There's other guys like Anais Peebles too from Virginia Tech, Josiah Stewart from Michigan. So many players with short arms who still are quality pass rushers that I think Joe Schoen will bring in and disregard the standard that seems to be going around the NFL that you need to have 32-inch arms if you're going to be a pass rusher. It's going to be drafted. So that's something else to keep in mind.
And I hope you're right that he's learned from his process, right? Because I think you have to play the market too. When he made the decision to draft Wan'Dale Robinson in the middle of round 2, that was a poor decision by him. And I think Wan'Dale Robinson is a solid player, not a good draft pick at that slot, but a solid player for them. And he should have understood the market. The market is this guy is an
Oliver, by the way. Sorry to cut you off.
Yes, no, that's all right. The linebacker, out of Oklahoma State. They he should have understood the market. The market was, this is an outlier, Wan'Dale Robinson. Insanely bad levels of reach, wingspan, hand size, all the things you don't want to see. This is an outlier pick, maybe in a slot only. You can get him later. Play the freaking market right there. Don't just take these guys earlier because you love this player. And I think hopefully he'll understand that with some of these outlier picks. Some less so than others. Like, I think Josiah Stewart is an insane player. Like, I don't care where they take him. Like, I like him a lot. But, the Wan'Dale pick was not the right pick at that time. And that's important to note that, like, if you are dealing with outlier players from a measurement standpoint, some teams are not going to have them on their board at all. So that means they're going to fall. That's just the reality of the situation. Only certain teams are looking to take them. You don't need to be the team that jumps out and does it. A few other things that he mentioned that I thought were interesting. Just 2 more things here that we'll get into. And the first is, he mentioned again, Nick, that when you look to build out a roster and when you look to build out a team, you want to build a roster to beat your division. He said that he's been consistent with that since the start, the importance of building out the roster to beat division. When you look at that, Nick, what stands out to you looking at the Commanders, the Eagles, and the Cowboys? What stands out to you as, what do we need to do to try to beat the division?
Let's protect the quarterback, like pass rushing, stopping their pass rush.
They all have good pass rushes.
And Micah Parsons as well, and Washington too. And I'll also say that was a question that was prompted to him, and he said, yeah, that's what you always want to do. I think he mentioned, he didn't bring up the names, but Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski when he was with Miami. Like, how do you stop well personnel with the Miami Dolphins against the New England Patriots? I would say that pass rush is probably the number one thing. There's also cornerbacks, stopping AJ Brown, stopping Devonta Smith, stopping CeeDee Lamb, stopping Terry McLaurin. So there's a lot of good receivers in this division as well. So those are the first 2 that come to my mind. I wanted to get your opinion as well. I mean, with the Eagles, it's tough to stop from a defensive perspective.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's so many ways they can beat you, but I think a big one for me is, you look at this division, both Kingsbury and the Eagles. Who's their OC now? Kellen Moore, but it's kind of Sirianni's offense. Both those teams, and now the Cowboys with Schottenheimer, because he's made it clear, they don't have a guy in place right now at that position, a running back position, but he's made it clear. it's going to be stopping the run. Like Kingsbury's system is predicated on the run game, and so is the Eagles system. And I think the Cowboys will go there as well. And that's something that you want to beat this division. You're going to have to stop the run. You're going to have to make a concerted effort to stop the run. Something the Giants can do a good job of. That's what came to mind. And then rushing the quarterback with players like Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels in there, finding unique ways to rush the quarterback. We talked a lot about like, oh my God, what are you going to do? People ask us, what are you going to do with Abdual Carter when you have Kayvon Thibodeau on one edge and when you have Burns on the other? You want to talk about something I saw him do at the college level at Penn State and did a damn good job of? Line him up over the A or B gap and let him spy. Now he's spying Jaden Daniels. Now he's spying Jalen Hurts. Now he's cutting off options for them in their passing game as runners. That's big for me. Like if you're looking at one player I think can most quickly help the Giants beat their division foes, it is Abdul Carter, because it is that exact role. You can put him either rushing the edge, but you don't need to rush the edge against those types of quarterbacks, Jaden and Jalen Hurts. You want to keep the pocket, so you force them inside as runners, just like they did with Daniel Jones and Hurts at times. And then you have Abdul Carter just closing that gap as athletically and fast and quick as I saw him do it against Rourke from Indiana and all these other quarterbacks, the Illinois quarterback, whatever his name is. So, I think that is maybe one of the things that we could look into.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's something we brought up extensively on this show is just getting another one of those linebackers who can spy, and the simulated pressure package of Shane Bowen is something we talk about a lot, but it's important because that's when the Tennessee Titans were at their best defensively with Shane Bowen, was when they were able to have those two quality safeties, which the Giants have now after signing Javon Holland, and they were able to send four in a disguised manner, which is what simulated pressures and creepers are all about. So if you add Abdul Carter, that just adds a totally different dynamic than the Giants have had in quite a while when it comes to that, especially in this modern defensive style that we've seen Shane Bowen employ.
It's exciting, dude. Like I think about it, and I still do want Travis Hunter if I had the choice of those two.
I guess
Carter,
I know exactly what you're going to say. Yeah.
Like I can see the path toward helping us quicker with Carter and just the path overall.
That's why it's a win-win, bro.
Yeah, it's a win-win because it's a win-win, but we'll see what they end up doing. I still think they might take Sanders at 3. And we'll get to some talk on Sanders on the next pod. Our thoughts on that a little bit more. We really haven't touched, but we did a profile on him. But
I think we talked a pretty decent amount.
Yeah, but I still think we could talk about that decision a little bit more as far as but yeah, regardless, point being, like I could see this path for Carter, and I love the off-ball snaps. I personally think those are the weapon snaps, and that's what people aren't giving enough credit to. Yes, he's amazing as a pass rusher, and people are like, oh, I'm scared about him as a run defender. I'm not as scared about that. I think he can grow into that. I think he can grow into his body too, right? Like he's still a young athlete, Nick. He's going to get stronger and bigger. So last final thing I wanted to discuss here that Joe Schoen mentioned, and this is something that I was so happy to hear him mention, Nick, because I've gotten these arguments with Giants fans in the past who somehow think that it was Joe Judge who made the Kadarius Toney pick. As Joe Schoen said, the final decision falls on me. I make the decision. If there's ever, because people are talking about what if they're divided in the Giants room? Some want Sanders at 3, some want Carter, blah, blah, blah. Joe Schoen makes that final decision. The GM makes that final decision. I've said it once. I'll say it again. I spoke with a former head coach who did not want the pick.
Isn't this obvious?
No, people said Joe Judge made the Kadarius Toney.
It's a collaborative effort, of course.
It's idiotic. It's just idiotic to think that Joe Judge of all Giants coaches was the one who found authority. The GM makes the final pick. Toney was a Dave Gettleman pick, as was every other pick. And a lot of times these coaches and GMs don't agree. I spoke about the coach that I spoke to who did not agree on taking Mitch Trubisky, but the GM overruled him. And that's how things go. It's the GM's pick. So put all the credit and all the blame on the GM.
Yeah. I mean, that's what
a big
general manager is. I mean, I don't really even know what the argument is. Of course, coaches and front offices, they have their say. It's a collaborative effort if it's a functioning team. But at the end of the day, the general manager is the one signing off on that draft selection. That doesn't mean that general managers may select somebody for a coach, but that's not what happened in 2021 with Kadarius Toney. What happened in 2021, it was a good process in trading down, but a terrible process. This is how nuanced this whole draft stuff is. A terrible process saying we're going to get a wide receiver. And hopefully Jalen Waddle or Devonta Smith. Oh, they're not there. Well, guess what? We said we're getting a wide receiver. Let's trade down and get this guy who's been arrested and has had all these issues at Florida, but he's very exciting. Let's get him. Pass on Christian Darrisaw there. Pass on Micah Parsons and Rashawn Slater with the trade down because they weren't even considering offensive line or any position that wasn't somebody who could help Daniel Jones. from a pass catching standpoint. That's after they signed Kenny Galladay. What a terrible offseason, that 2021 offseason. That's when, dude, that was our first offseason, I think, together, right? We did a little bit of 2020. No, we were there for 2020 because I remember doing it during the pandemic, but 2021 was our second full season together with an entire football season that we did together as a podcast. Oh my gosh, man, that was abysmal. That was crazy. Sorry.
Yeah, it was. And that falls on Gettleman. He took Tony there. He also decided to sign Galladay despite, the bad medicals and bidding against himself. Just a horrible pass. We hope we move past that. I just thought it was interesting because there has been some discussion. It does come down to Shane. And when it comes to this picnic, whether it be Sanders or Hunter or Carter, I think there is some disagreement in the building. I think that's pretty obvious. It's a speculation, but I think it's a fair speculation to make. And so we know in the end, whatever that decision is, Sanders or the player, it will be a Joe Schoen decision because unless miraculously they're all on the same page and we just don't know about it. But I don't know if I get that feeling. And that's something that's interesting. Do you get the feeling they're on the same page or they might be in different spots?
It's really hard for me to know at this point.
That's fair.
I mean, this is smokescreen season, but
I know.
I wouldn't be shocked if they weren't. They've been kind of on this tenuous ground for a little bit now, Shane and Dable, and they got this extra year and hopefully they're seeing things the same way. But these are two very hard-headed alpha males. I know they're friends and everything, but friends don't always see everything the same way. So hard for me to know. I would not be shocked if they are not, though.
Fair enough. All right. That's all we have for key takeaways from Joe Schoen's presser and our thoughts on those. Thank you for tuning into Big Blue Banter. Keep it locked and loaded. Hit the like button now. Subscribe if you haven't already. We're so close to 10K. Please leave a comment, but subscribe as well. You might have enjoyed and heard our live show from yesterday. We're going to likely do another one next week before the draft. Also, keep in mind, we are doing a breakdown of top 30 visits. We're going to do offensive and defense side of the ball. We're going to get into those prospects they brought in the top 30, explaining why. But a quick key is they've drafted 10 players in the last 3 classes from their top 30 visits. We will see at least and no fewer than 3. So we will probably see 3 players in this draft class from these top 30 visits. So they're very important names to know. We'll also be having one more guest on, Jacob Gibbs, who I work with at CBS Sports. I haven't seen anyone dive more into the RB tape than him. And he's got the stats, advanced stats to back it up and the film to back it up. We're going to get a deep dive into tiered rankings of the running back class with thoughts on every player. I'm really excited for that. More to come. Dueling mock drafts from Nick and I next week. Our My Guys episodes, in addition to a lot of other content. So keep it locked and loaded. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.